Hello, welcome to Hotline FN. This is Fortnite Season 9, Week 3. And we're here with the live call-in show about competitive Fortnite, where we talk about your hot takes, bold predictions, and unpopular opinions with a panel of hosts. This week, we've got kind of a special announcement as well as a guest host. First, I'd like to introduce to you the new permanent co-host, BallaTW, and our special guest host. You know him as a competitive player as well as an administrator over a lot of the practice arenas. We've got SoaR Infamous. Welcome to the show tonight, guys.
What's up?
Hey, Balla. First off, thanks again for showing up, for being here, for agreeing to be a permanent co-host on Hotline FN. What have you been up to this week?
Yeah, man. Dude, thanks for letting me do this. I think you have a good thing going here, so I'm excited to see what the future holds for the show. I have been up to, I released a video. I went to Hot Pot last night. It's pretty fucking good. Delicious.
Ooh.
You know, broths and all sorts of nice meats and just delicious. But yeah, video, bot review, and I'm going to be competing this week, so I've been just practicing and grinding for this weekend.
Heck yeah. Hell yeah. So you'll be playing in the qualifiers this week.
Yep.
Yes,
NA
let's
East,
go.
and I'll cast whatever else. So.
Nice. Let's go. That'll be great. That'll be great. I know the question burning on everyone's mind now, or at least mine, is Infamous, do you like hot pot?
I have never had it.
Whoa! All right. Well, what have you been up to this week besides not eating hot pot?
Just grinding for World Cup, giving out Prac invites, you know, the usual stuff, getting hate on Twitter, you know, all the stuff that happens.
Yikes. the usual. No big deal. All right.
It happens.
Here's a topic to start us off with that is big on a lot of people's minds, especially in the competitive subreddit. Vehicles in arena. This is it's been a minute, right? Like it's been a minute since we've had qualifiers with vehicles. Balla, you're already shaking your head. What do you got to say on this?
We just had 2 weeks of such great qualifiers. I mean, to see that and to not like even indicate that they are watching and they understand and they kind of, you know, they agree with how the state of the event went is very disheartening. I saw that news and I was belligerent. Let's be honest here. I was in a call with Bumpa. I was freaking out. But like, yeah, it's they apparently they fixed the bug. I think there's still some bugs with the vehicles, which may not be widespread enough for them to be like, yeah, this is an issue. We're going to shut down the vehicles. But in my opinion, if it's an issue that can affect one person and you can stop it, then you should stop it. And in addition, just the game is just better without the vehicles.
Without all of them.
Ballers, the game is just better.
Ballers, like, specifically.
Like even without, I would trade quads and driftboards for no ballers.
Someone on Twitter said that. They were like, you said get rid of all vehicles. I was like, I'd gladly give up the quad crashers and the hoverboards, everything for them to take out ballers, because it just changes the entire dynamic of the mid game. It changes the entire rotation plan, changes where people drop. Even they change their drops based on whether there are balls or not. So
yeah, no, I completely. At what point do you think there's a point where like it's too close, right? Like, is there a point this week, like say late Friday, where they go, all right, no vehicles? Like, is that just too close? Like, do they have to leave him in at this point, even if they wanted to take him out for next week?
I mean, I would disagree. I think nothing is too close for Epic. I mean, we saw that they basically took them out like late Saturday, early Sunday, the first time that they took them out. So I mean, if they have to disable them, I think that they will. But them showing that they want to keep them in, you know, early this week, I think they're definitely not going to, unless there's a serious problem that comes up. Or some serious, you know, issue that arises. I don't think they're going to take them out for any reason.
Yeah, I think it's funny too that like the change that we don't like, which is them adding them back, is the one that comes way ahead of time. Whereas we knew about the baller bug for days ahead of time last Saturday, and it didn't get disabled until Saturday.
People complain.
Like literally Saturday. Like it was at the end of the semis because there were so many people that had issues with it. So yeah.
So what did you see then? What did you see? Like, you know, Balla, you were casting this weekend, right? So like, like what did you see this weekend specifically that just makes you go, no, this is just better without it. De facto, we don't need it.
Less chaotic. I mean, Fortnite is already a chaotic game to track and to watch.
No.
Like, it's so hard to cast an end game. And then with the fact that there's baller sounds going off in the background, tons of grappling hooks, all that sort of stuff, and then they're just flying around. There's many of them in the end game. Plus the quality of player that makes it the end game. It just makes those so much better, right? A 1v1 with no ballers at the end is 10,000 times better. All of the 1v1s that I watched last weekend were so good compared to any weekend with ballers, right? Those are almost always, like, unless it's two good players that you know, which sometimes does happen, and it should happen a lot, right? Because good players should make it through and they should win. But it was almost always not good players fighting in a 1v1, and it was just like, okay, well, this guy has more HP, or he has a drum gun, or whatever, or he got the first shot, and now they're 50-50 each other, and it's over. Like, that's kind of how I feel about that. But one thing that I don't know yet is I don't think we know how the 150 HP change actually affects how the qualifiers will go. I don't think we've had, besides the one semifinals day, and semifinals you can't actually get an opinion on. So that might be a reason why they're like, yeah, let's make sure that we try it again with 150 HP to see if it's, makes it better, which I think it could. I think it could have a great effect.
Something about the 150 HP is, can the combat, I know that 70 damage shots in the combat are relatively common. You can hit an 80 on a baller if you catch it close enough, right? Or 70 max for body damage.
From like a decent range, yeah, you can. I think the environmental damage, I'm sure that they recently fixed that for the combat shotgun.
Sure.
I think
The
Lord
drop-off.
NM or something tweeted out about that. So they investigated that and they checked it out. I think they fixed that.
Yep.
But yeah, the ballers are really not hard to pop at all anymore.
It should only take
still
like
think,
2 combat shots, right? Like,
right.
You should pull that
but
off.
The issue for me is not even the fact that they changed the entire dynamic of how the game is played. So back, I don't know, in like season 3, season 4, when we didn't even have vehicles, rotations were actually just like a legitimate skill. Like, people who knew how to rotate, if your normal path got cut off, okay, how am I going to get around and get to a spot where I'm going to be safe? What's the best position I can take in this circle? What's too risky? How far can I go into the circle without being shot? Just analyzing the situation, being able to rotate on foot is actually like a legitimate skill. And ballers basically just removed that. So that's the thing. That's the issue I have with ballers mainly, is the fact that like a facet of the game that could have increased the skill cap has just been completely taken out. And I think that, honestly, if you want to argue that ballers could be good for the game in terms of lag, or we didn't see much lag in the games before when we didn't have ballers, so that argument's out the window in my opinion.
We didn't see a lot last week.
Argument.
Yeah.
I just don't see any reason to keep them in. I don't have any arguments for them. There's multiple arguments against them that are very sound and proven. So I just don't know what Epic's thinking, but we'll see this weekend.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's fair, right? But I think you mentioned how rotating is a genuine skill, and having ballers kind of removes some of that need for that skill if you get a baller. But we also have the slipstreams now, right? And we've got the freaking helicarrier sky bases. All of those have the same outcome to an extent.
Come on.
Well, for early to mid rotates.
No, you have to know what paths to take that are actually good. Number one, sure, they can get you long distances, but that's not even the rotates that Infamous is talking about, right? He's talking about, like, trying to get across from third circle to fourth circle.
Right.
And if you try to use a slipstream in finals, like, and you do that, then you're getting beamed and you're gonna die. Like,
if you touch any of that at fourth circle,
it actually does.
And they get disabled after fourth or fifth circle, right? What is it? Fifth circle they get disabled.
Fifth circle.
Yeah. So right there, it's out the window. But for me, the thing about, like, people always want to argue like, oh, what was worse for the game, planes or ballers? I don't think planes were even that bad, because planes only affected the mid game. Planes really only didn't do much in the end game very much. Like, early game and mid game pretty much were the only times. But ballers stay in the game until end game. People change their drops early game, have insane rotate. They can go across the map mid game if they want to. So I don't know. It affects all times of the game, and it's just it's really the most overpowered vehicle we've seen in terms of just how much usefulness it has.
I don't know, dude. That's a take and a half. The ballers in their current state, or maybe 200 hit point state, are worse.
No, I'm just saying in general as like a concept.
You gotta remember release planes, man. Like, free crashing into people. I mean, like that alone, was pretty bad.
It was bad. But at the same time, the thing about ballers is that it completely takes that skill gap out of the game where it comes to like, okay, the people who are very cerebral about what they want to do, how they want to rotate, where they want to get their picks and when. All of that is basically out the window when you have a baller. You start spamming a guy and he has a baller, his stuff breaks, he just boosts away. You know, just different. There's so many different facets of the game that just get dumbed down.
That doesn't even like account for the fact that literally ballers ruin the map because, that one kid just said, I feel like ballers expanded the map, but in my opinion, it literally ruined the map because all the paths that you would take on foot in the early game, they're just completely ruined. If you weren't going to a POI, everything else was looted by ballers. Everything else was looted by ballers.
Yep. Okay. All right. All right. Do you think that there's obviously minus ballers? Do you feel like, I don't know, this is kind of interesting, right? We talked a bit before on the show about like scavenger paths and that kind of thing, right? Obviously having a baller lends itself to that play style incredibly well. Without ballers, do you think more people are able to play scavenger paths, or is it the other way around? Before, one guy with the baller can make it to each spot way faster. Yes.
Yes, 100%, because one baller can cover way more ground. So like when I did my scavenger pass in the Happy Hamlet like ice area, I would take every single one of those houses within like 2 minutes, right? Whereas somebody on foot would be able to like, get like the cave, right? And then that was it. Like he could go like one spot and then go to the cave, and that was it. And everything else would be looted by then.
So like if I'm in the Northeast, which is where I land over north of the volcano, when I'm over there, and if I don't have a ball, I can basically loot those 3 little hangars, and then I loot the solar panels hangar right next to it, and maybe one more little place to loot, and then that's it. With ballers, I can basically cover the entire Northeast in about the same time that I would take to get 2 extra little places on foot. So that changes the entire dynamic of the game. That changes the entire way that people play. If people want to play aggressive, they can do that a lot more easily. Even though there's already a lot of rotation on the Northeast already, it's placed in certain locations to where if you're going to go and hit different geysers and stuff like that, people expect, okay, this is the path you're going to take. But with ballers, you can just go completely anywhere. You can loot completely anything. If I wanted to, I could go straight from my drop to Lazy Lagoon in 30 seconds. And just completely, absolutely, there's no, any semblance of a path there. You're just going wherever you want. Yeah. So that's the thing I have with ballers, is that there used to be such a beautiful idea of, okay, everybody lands somewhere, everybody's rotating for more loot. This person doesn't have enough loot. He needs to, change up his route. Just the mental game of the rotation in the mid game is just completely gone. It's just mindless now.
Yeah, I can totally see that. It's another thing kind of with, squads, even just playing squads casually, you kind of get into a game and you're like, I have to walk places and think about this. Like, wait, what? Like, this is very different. All right, let's bring our first.
Like, it doesn't matter.
That's true. That's true. I'm thinking them past, man. My mind's stuck in season 8. All right, let's bring in our first guest here. We've got Trax. Trax, how are you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing good.
Good. Glad to hear it. This is your second time calling into the show, right?
Yeah, I did one last week.
Yeah. What did you want to talk about tonight?
I was wanting to talk about like the Discords and like all the new Discords are being made, and then like what Discord should be made. Because like a lot of people are like Booga is choosing to do Atlantis over Prac Court because like finals is 3,000 players. It's not like the top 100 pros in the game. Just to like, which is like a whole sweaty lobby where you can't really W key how you would in finals for World Cup.
Okay. What's I know obviously you've been talking a lot about this, Balla, and obviously Infamous. I'm sure you've been talking about it. And I know you started your stream a little bit with talking about this this morning, Balla. So what want to recap that a little bit?
Yeah, more Discords is bad, but the custom system right now doesn't like support anything. It's just archaic. It's the only thing that actually works is Atlantis, and why? Because you can run. There's so many people in there that you can run a custom literally every 5 minutes because there's so many people, and when you run every 5 minutes, there's no false starts. If there are false starts, it doesn't matter because enough people have queued, and there's no leaks because it's open. So that's the only thing that actually works well without frustrating people and getting people to rage and to grief the customs. Even when they get into the game, they rage about, not getting into the game, false starts, all this stuff, and then it just leads to terrible quality of practice. I think right now the World Cup practice server that Clix has made is actually running pretty well, but I can't see it lasting until the money incentives come in, and I don't think the money incentives will technically they should. There's a lot of technicalities with money incentives, and I don't think that we're thinking about that too much. And we need more support to be able to actually track all that stuff. So, yeah. So practice sucks right now.
I mean, to add on, I think Clix and Dubs and Mega have done a good job with that Discord so far. Like you said, I definitely don't think it'll last very long. It's just it's a way that we're going to get people to play now and play hard for something new and something that they could potentially have real incentive in, because I'm not sure what it is. A lot of people simply don't want to play it, and we don't have that issue in duo weeks, but I will say it becomes exacerbated during the solo weeks. Every solo week we're very struggling to get any of the pros to play, and I don't know if that's because they feel it's more RNG, or they just don't like the quality of the practice of some kind, or people just don't take the games themselves seriously. But it's definitely a recurring problem with the solo weeks. Duos, we have absolutely no issue. Every time we run duos in Elite, we have enough people going until almost midnight. Every time it's usually fine. But the solos is definitely lacking, and I think this is where that Discord is going to fill that hole for now. Obviously, more Discords is always bad. I don't like the idea of splitting up the community, trying to keep it as much as possible, as close as possible to one spot. Back before we even had customs, it was all just Atlantis, so we could all just use snipe and all that. So
to be fair though, with customs, actually more Discords is kind of okay, but not for the long run, because more Discords with customs, if you have 100 people who are active, that's what you need, and you don't actually want more than that, right? Because then you end up running into host issues, people breaking, you run into more possibilities of false starts and all that stuff because you just have more people. So it's actually okay right now, but in the long run, it's bad, because in the long run, if you want to run any sort of rank system, if you want to run any sort of system where you're not always playing against the same people, if you want to run any sort of system that will 100% be active at all times of the day, you can't have multiple Discords. You need everybody to be in the same place, because there's just not enough competitive players.
Yeah, definitely. The other interesting thing here is, so we were kind of talking about this last episode a little bit, but as Infamous mentioned, solos, people just like solos less, even though it's 50,000 just to qualify, people just don't enjoy playing solos. It's not fun, right? It's just not as fun as the other game modes. And this is another situation where limiting the competitive scene at least to one game mode, duos, trios, squads, whatever, would benefit the scene. You don't have to split practice based on what people are focused on. It's a huge thing.
There's no dichotomy of, I like this better, I can go play this, and I don't want to play that, right? There's none of that. There's just more focused. The quality of games is going to go up because everybody's practicing the same thing over and over and over.
Yep.
Just way, way better. Just all angles of having one mode is so much better.
Then the sort of thing piggybacking on the custom situation is the topic of arena, right? And while arena definitely has a lot of potential improvements, I think that ultimately, no matter how good arena gets, just no matter how competitive solo queue and League of Legends gets, scrims are still where real practice is. Obviously, that's way easier when all you need is 2 teams of 10 that are all in professional organizations to play against each other, right? And it's significantly harder when you've got 50 duos or whatever trying to practice with each other. But ultimately, we can make arena way more competitive, right? I mentioned earlier to Balla that if customs disappeared tomorrow, practice would suck for the top tier. But for 90% of the competitive player base, practice would be infinitely better than it is now for them. And that's kind of a tough balance.
That would literally be the only source of practice. So.
Exactly. So everybody would be playing it.
But that's
right?
the thing. In League of Legends, you see teams doing scrims. You see them playing scrims, and you see them going and like for a few hours a day, they're playing solo queue. And why is that? Because the League of Legends rank system isn't half bad.
No,
like,
not at all. It's good.
It gives an incentive for people to actually try and play seriously. If you get rank 1 on that leaderboard and you are nobody, you will get calls from certain teams potentially if you're holding that spot for a long time. If you're proving yourself against top players on streams,
not to mention rank 1 is a 5,000 viewer stream easy the next day, right? Like it's just good for everybody.
Right. So, I mean, I just don't understand. Like, I thought immediately when I heard Arena, I was like, oh, okay, we're going to have a leaderboard because they had just implemented the leaderboards, right? So I was like, they're going to have a leaderboard. They're going to have a bunch of people. Yeah, they're going to have stuff like where it's Overwatch, where if you don't play enough, you're going to get dropped out of the top X amount. Like if they just had like a rank where it was like top 500, top 200, something like that, just something for people to grind for, to where they could actually say, hey, I'm one of the top players here. A lot of people would take Arena a lot more seriously. But at the moment, it's just 15-minute queues. You queue into a siphon pub. That's basically what it's been reduced to because there's nothing to play for past 300 points. There's absolutely nothing you want to do for it.
We saw that rank 1 effect that you guys are talking about in League in Gauntlet. When we had the Gauntlet, we had it for 2 weeks or whatever. Cease was popping off on his streams. I mean, he always pops off.
I was chasing him the entire time.
He was popping off. Like, he was going way up there because he was grinding it, and it was fun for him, and he wanted to stay top 1, and everybody was like, oh, shit, he's at the top of the leaderboard. Let's watch him. Yeah. So there's that effect. But, I don't know why it's a but. It shouldn't be a but. It's... For some reason, it feels like Epic is really scared to hurt people's feelings. Like, they developed the leaderboard, and now the only thing they used it for is the World Cup qualifiers, even though they specifically practiced and tried it for long format type of stuff. And now they took it away because it feels like, based on the format and a lot of stuff, they just don't want to hurt people's feelings because you can't de-rank. Like, and I get that it's a kids game, but this is arena mode. Like, the kids aren't going to be at the top. They're not going to get their feelings hurt. Just like put the threshold up to a certain point, and then let the people who you don't want to hurt their feelings play in that little bracket because they're.
If
not
anything, it's going to be better for them because they're going to see, hey, I accomplished this rank. I am legitimately at the top. I'm here. I'm being consistent. I'm not dropping out. Showing that and like showing, hey, like this is an open place where you can prove that you're one of the best players. That is important. And it's like, what does it matter if you get 1,000 points in arena right now? No one's going to respect that. If you get 1,000 points in arena, no one takes the game seriously. You can get top 25 in third circle. Like, no one's going to respect point farming in arena when the arena games aren't good.
Can we instill a sense of pride and accomplishment in our players, or like what? Like, come on.
No, that's a great point. That's a fantastic point. I think that, a lot of the sorts of improvements that would make Arena better that I like to talk about, like mechanical changes to how ranking works and de-ranking and that kind of stuff, are all kind of superseded by like this. Ultimately, we need a leaderboard. Heck, if they just added a leaderboard to what's happening right now and maybe a second division with tighter fall off, right? Like an even stricter bus fare after, say, 500 points or something, right? Because otherwise you just have time played inflation, right? But give us that, give us a leaderboard, and that instantly makes Arena so much better overnight. And then you restrict it to 1 queue, bam, golden, right? Like everybody's playing. At least some amount. All right. Thank you so much, Trax. Oh, what's up?
How do you guys feel about so what if Fortnite added like how they did before of the 3-hour like events every day, but like for like a prize, just like V-Bucks, because it won't hurt. Like it'll be some type of practice.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that would be good. Just any incentives in general that they could put into the game to help people take the games more seriously. Clearly, like the queue times, having long queue times is not something that they want, so that's not an option for making the games being taken more seriously by the different players, because people will still play the same way no matter how long they have to queue for the game. But regardless of that, I think incentive is always good in terms of trying to get people to play seriously.
So two things, and I think that's my last thoughts on this, is I've never seen a game put any sort of incentive, whether it's fake incentive like V-Bucks or monetary incentive or skin incentive or anything like that. I've never seen a game put that in their matchmaking system.
Well, League of Legends.
I don't know if there's any examples of that. Sure, you get stuff for playing
At the
right?
end of the
Just normal
season,
playing.
at the end of the season, you get rewards for being a certain rank.
You get
Okay, I didn't know
skins,
that.
you get banners,
Cool.
icons,
Yeah,
all
right,
kinds
cool.
of shit. Yeah.
All right, perfect. That's awesome. Good. There's an example of that. But number two, I would only be okay with timed pop-ups if they can't fix the arena queues, because I don't think it's. I feel really bad about forcing practice to certain times. I feel like we need 24/7 access to practice because. People work different shifts. People have different schedules, blah, 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 blah. So I would only be okay with that if they couldn't fix arena queues.
Kind of the base. Go for it.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, kind of the base crux of like open online qualifiers directly fights specific timed, practice events, right? Like,
Right. The only exception that I would make with that is that, like, I think that there should be some like practice World Cup, for example, like in the middle of the week, let's say have an event that's 4 to 7, just like the World Cup, exact same rules as the World Cup, with, let's say, the top 3,000 players from last weekend. What's wrong with that? You know what I mean? Just have that as like a little bit of or maybe the top last 3,000 solo players or whatever it would be. But just have the top players play in the middle of the week in a practice format that resembles the actual event, because that is completely different than any practice you can get.
As long as it doesn't ruin arena, right? Like as long as it doesn't ruin the main format. If you take all these people who played well and you put them in a limited, but if you put them in the side and it ruins the queues again, then I'm not okay with that. Like I just need that format to be open for everybody to play at all times. And sure, you could do side like limited stuff where there's only a certain amount of people who are in there. That's cool, but it also should refresh, right? The limited time events is unacceptable because I have no way to actually get into those because I was casting Secret Skirmish. I have literally no way.
I don't even know how you got in. I'm in it, but I have no idea how I got in. No one knows exactly the criteria. No one knows when they have to be on, what they have to do it. And so I just think we need, more than ever, I think we just need transparency. They're starting to be a little bit more transparent on the communication side, which is always a good sign. But I definitely think that they need to have a little bit of a more back and forth discussion instead of just telling us their reason. They need to listen to us a little bit on that side, on that front as well.
Yeah, I will say that like the existence of limiting testing events is like both like kind of frustrating and also like a non-problem, right? It's like frustrating in that like, wow, these specific group of players get better practice than anybody else does, midweek or whatever, for whatever random reason. And the other side is like people complaining like this week, right? Oh, why is it duos and not solos? Like it's a testing event, right? It's not there for our practice.
Testing events are testing events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can't complain.
All right, Trax, thanks so much for spending part of your evening with us tonight.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. I also want to talk about here, Absolute Unit posed a question here. This is something interesting that I haven't gotten a chance to talk about a lot. The new, I don't know the actual term for it, but the new hot drop effect on the map, where one of the POIs is marked in gold. Their little zoom in drones fly around in the sky, and they drop one stack of ammo for the one rare or better or always rare weapon. Rare, of course, being blue. Do you guys know if they can drop better, or is it just blue?
They can. I think
better.
they can drop better. It's only weapons though.
100%.
So then the question is like, we've got this week, right? We're gonna have this weekend in solos. Like, how is that going to change things? How is that going to affect drops? Is that going to draw people or push them away from these spots? I don't know. Infamous, do you have any thoughts on this yet?
So I think that in the normal early games, in the normal like facet of the game, it's not going to change people's drops. But what it will change is how people treat their 3 free games. So basically right now, in the way that the format is set up, you can basically play around 7 games full all the way out. So you have about 2 or 3 games to where you can just W key, or you're trying to, take risks. Basically 3 freebies that you can throw away. As long as you make it in the end game in about 7 games, you can still have a chance to be at the very top as long as you perform there. So it's going to change the way that people take those games. If they want to go and take risks by trying to get better loot, they're going to do that. If they have games left over, if they're not afraid of dying in that certain game, they're going to be like, hey, I'm going to the high loot area. It's like around here. I have a baller. Let me just go ahead and zoom on over there. If I get some good loot and salvage this game, sure. If I die over there to some people getting some of that loot, then why not? It's a free game. I'll just throw it away. So it'll definitely affect the way that the World Cup is played. I don't think that it's going to affect anything in scrims or arena or any of that. Obviously, it's just going to be more loot for the people there. But in those W key games, and those games where people have ample time and ample room to take risk, they will definitely do so by going to those POIs.
Sure. Something interesting I've realized so far, right, is at least, I mean, obviously this is arena, and it didn't really matter because I've only played no zone rules customs lately, but it definitely encourages rotations into that spot, right? Like if you
Right.
are viewing Dusty from afar, right, you're kind of just guessing like, it's probably been looted. But if you see drones floating around in the sky, you know there's some form of loot there, right? At the very least, in the form of these drones.
Right, with visual looting, right? And you can see that over Dusty, and you just go in and you're just like, okay, yeah, I know for a fact that I'm not taking a risk for nothing here. There is something that I can gain. So yeah, it definitely helps with that decision making to go into that POI, even if you're scared of getting fought or third partied in there.
Definitely.
So I think it's a case of wait and see right now. I don't agree with Infamous that it's not going to have any effect in games besides like the hot drop games for people, because I've played around with them, and I've played with like strategies of like dropping near it and pushing into it and whatever. And I think it's really, really good at getting you set up for endgame. Besides no mobility, it's really, really good at getting you a gold scar or whatever, like a drum gun or whatever you don't have, a good combat shotgun, right? With the nerf to, some certain things not dropping, combat shotgun being one of those. I think that it's very strong at setting you up. The only thing it doesn't drop is it doesn't drop heals or any utility at all, but it does drop gels and explodes. Which is interesting. I'm not sure about RPGs. I still haven't figured out its useful. So it drops RPGs. That's huge, right? That's very huge. And so I think it's wait and see. I don't think people are fully understanding or using it to its full extent yet. Like, I'm not sure if the case about mid-game rotating is true. I feel like I haven't seen a situation where I've been like, oh yeah, there's that, I should go for it. Because do they actually stay for past early game? Or do they disappear afterwards? It stays past early game?
Yeah, they stay.
Okay. All right, well then that's cool, because that gives you 100% a guaranteed scavenger path, right? You can be like, okay, I'm going to take this, and then I'm 100% going here because there's 100% going to be loot there. But then there's the flip side, right? Is Click's going to camp? Is Booga going to camp the hot drop spot and just sit there and fight people because they're going to rotate on you? There's a ton of unclear meta around it, and I don't think people are using it to its full extent. I don't think people understand it yet. Just like first week with the shotgun changes and the drum gun changes and all that, I don't think people understood it yet. So then the next week we saw all the different changes that people played.
I think it creates
oh yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it creates very interesting potential play patterns in some of the larger POIs, right? Like you can land on, say, shithouse in Pleasant, right? And then just look up in the sky and decide, I don't need to go anywhere else. I got shield here. Maybe my weapons are crap, but I can just shoot drones because there's a couple flighting above me, and I don't have to worry about pushing into other houses just yet, or whatever. And that applies to whatever larger POI this happens at, right? I think that's really interesting. I also think the potential for it kind of, to me, it seems like it could buff outskirt drops, landing at the haunted mansion outside of Pleasant when Pleasant has the drones, because all you're really looking for is some decent enough loot to start shooting drones out of the sky out from on the outskirts, and then moving on, right?
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Another thing, I'm personally a non-POI dropper. I don't like dropping at POIs if I can help it. I've always tried to drop at certain places, except for when Whaling was in the game, I used to go there. But generally, I try to stick to places that aren't really POIs, aren't really too heavy traffic. One of my main criteria for picking a spot is places that people won't really rotate to. So I would have personally liked to see them rework the hot zone, mechanic into an actual physical zone on the map that could go anywhere. So I think that would have been great for places that don't have much use. So if you look at north of Lazy Lagoon, who's going to go there? What reason would you go there? Just random POIs on the map that are just little holes of loot. They just don't have anything there. So if you would have reworked it into that and actually made it so people could have spread out on the map, I think it would have been a much better change. But there's no point in really adding more loot to places that already have a majority of the loot.
I love that idea. And it would actually, open the possibility of having more of these zones, because right now, if it's one or two, right, per game.
Yeah.
And so you don't really have an opportunity. If you have a game plan, you're going to stick with it. So you're going to go whatever spot you have, and if there's no hot drop near it, you can't take advantage of it. So I love that idea. I want to see more of them on different spots, because I feel like you can't use it except for a random game. So it's like complete. It's basically circle RNG, right? In a different shape or form. But one thing I did want to touch on real quick was the fact that this is kind of like zombies, minus the fact that it doesn't drop shields, and they don't shoot back, and they're not annoying, and they don't break your builds, and they don't make tons of noise, and they don't.
They're not everywhere.
Well, they do drop explodes.
So maybe they're not that much like zombies.
No, but the things that people liked about zombies. Remember, after zombies went away, everybody was like, "Hey,
less RNG,
we should keep the zombies, less RNG." I was like, "You guys are crazy." Number one, but number two, all those things are now in this, like, it's all packaged into a nice package up in the sky that floats around your POI. Like,
I definitely wish they would include
like
shields.
I love it. Yeah, I like maybe just put shields when you kill them, like zombies. Like,
yeah, like that's the main thing that people loved about that.
But yeah, exactly.
It's the main thing people loved about zombies was the fact that you could actually get consistent, guaranteed shield, and like shield is so important in this game. People don't realize. I mean, spawning with basically half your health, you know what I mean, is always going to be. If someone has a really good gun, like a shotgun that can one shot you, you know, and they have 50 shield, that's pretty much GG. Doesn't matter what you have in your inventory as long as they play it right. So just the health is very important in this game. I don't think people understand how important really health.
The game is balanced around having 200 hit points.
Yeah,
like it's not. The weapons are balanced around having 100 health.
If you go into a fight with 100, you're most likely going to die every single time if the person has even 50 shield on you, because it's just that much of a difference. Unless you get completely free shots on them, they don't cover their back or something like that. Then you're most likely going to win that fight if you have more shield and like maybe even one or two good guns that can just 50-50 them.
Yep. Yeah, and health thresholds mean a lot, right? Like getting a headshot by an AR twice, right? 125 is a meaningless threshold most of the time. 150 is huge though. Even like 140 compared to like 100, 125 is a big deal when risking a 50-50 against somebody or a fight in general. I agree with that. Health is more ways to find shield is going to be good and healthy for the game long term. I think that they need to explore ways to give us that without giving us replenishable at any time shield, right? I think that's maybe what they're worried about. Obviously, they reduced the stacks on minis quite a while ago at this point, right? I'd be interested in them to continue to explore ways to give players shield, even making it an event, making it an objective, you know, through things like this, like the drones. Without just putting stuff in our inventory to heal whatever multiple times, right?
Right. I think that, like, honestly, there's a need for rotation items in the game, but I think that there's been an oversaturation of rotation items. If you look at how many rotation items there are in the game, combined with the fact that you have all these different vehicles that you can rotate with. I mean, early and mid game, it's pretty much fine. But if you're talking about the late game, you have a lot of rotation items that could, if with a few changes to the way zones work, could easily just be phased out, where you could basically just completely fight, you know, on foot. And like, I feel like the on foot experience of competitive Fortnite is just so much better than just any of the items, because from a spectator perspective, someone popping like a shadow bomb or, you know, using a rift, you kind of just lose the feeling of like all danger, or, you know, all tension. Just kind of like, oh yeah, they get a free rotate.
Nah. I mean, come on. Some of the best moments we've seen recently have been shadow bomb plays. Like,
oh no, okay,
there's crazy rift clutches. Like, I love the mobility options. I think that right now the mobility endgame is in a great state. Right, they wanted the increased movements of zones to reduce heal offs. Right, that was very clear.
That's what I was saying. You have to change the zones though to do that. 100%.
Yeah, and going back, like, kind of starts to get back towards where we were before, which is like more type of heal offy, like standoffs, like not much actually happening. But when you move, it forces engagements, and that's what we need. We don't want to go back to the state where there's 30 people in last zone, right?
What I will say,
a little bit, but
yeah. What I will say is that, like, I definitely like the fact that they're moving towards more fluid loadouts. If you're gonna keep those rotation items in the game and have a lot of them, you need to be able to have it so that you can only carry like 2 guns. The 3-gun loadout is dead. I'm sorry, but the 3-gun loadout is pretty much on its last little bit. I don't think that it's going to be meta for too much longer, especially if they start buffing or, you know, start adding different things to the utility, start buffing the new TAC AR, for example, maybe a little bit. I don't even think it needs a buff personally, but some people think it feels weaker. I think it's probably the best gun mid-range right now. Maybe, you know,
the TAC AR. Yeah, okay.
the attack AR. From mid-range, I think just because of its bloom, for its damage output and its fire rate, if you take all of that into account, it's probably one of the best things you can carry right next to a shotgun in the end game. Maybe a couple shadow bombs and 2 heals, and you're pretty much good to go. I think that loadout is the loadout of future, honestly, where people are just going to be taking 2 guns and just running anything that they can find in terms of rotation and heals. And nobody's going to be really running. You're not going to see people running 3 or 4 guns ever again. I mean, especially if they keep adding these hybrid items that fill these niches. That's the best thing about it, is that there's a niche that the TAC AR truly filled. It's a little bit longer range than the blue SMG, but it's not necessarily an AR. It still has a good fire rate, but not as much bloom.
Well, so I think it's the opposite of a niche, right? Like it's filling more space.
Yeah.
I mean, the niche
same with the
gun.
combat shotgun, same with the drum gun. They're all a little bit more versatile, where you can use them for tons of different things. So I really like the weapons right now. The drum gun, actually, like after some time, it's I wish they would still reduce the mag size, but I've been seeing, like, everything I've watched is mostly people aren't carrying it as much. Like, we were wrong last week in saying that the nerf wasn't anything. Like, it's actually, scars are better for people late game, it feels like, right? The TAC AR, Infamous is saying he likes it better. Like, I don't know. I really like the versatility we can get right now.
Last week, Elevate was saying he liked it better as well. The TAC AR, he was claiming that it was going to be all the rage, and Balla was here shaking his head. And one of those 2 people qualified for World Finals last week, and the other didn't.
I wasn't playing. Okay, Tim, I wasn't playing, buddy.
But yeah, I definitely think that like the meta overall right now, and this is something that people don't give Epic credit for right now, is that the meta is actually in a pretty good spot. If you take away the vehicles, I honestly think this is one of the best metas we've had in competitive Fortnite, because the spam meta has pretty much gone. People are starting to use the combat shotgun and not starting to understand how to use it. And it's actually a very versatile weapon when it is consistent, and after the buff and everything and the changes that they made, it's a very consistent weapon, and it can be used in multiple scenarios with multiple different guns. So I think we're in a good spot right now.
Yeah, but will you tweet that though?
If they take vehicles out, that's what I was saying. That's the asterisk to this meta. Is that they take if we have ballers gone, I think this meta is probably perfect.
Something we saw with this last patch note where they unvaulted the semi-auto sniper, just very, very weird. People are like, oh, it completes the spam meta. Now we have a spam sniper too. It's like, what are you talking about? Were you paying attention? Like, that's
ever. So whatever, man.
Which is an interesting
another hunting rifle in a box. I mean, you're just gonna. It's just like another time where it's just gonna be like you drop on a box or you drop on a chest and you immediately get a semi-auto sniper. You got to run and get more.
Yeah,
so
I read some of those comments. That's just so far-fetched and ridiculous. It's the same. It's the same people who are typing, "John Wick is the best competitive mode we've ever had."
yeah, definitely. Although, I mean, John Wick was fun.
I didn't get to play it, man.
Oh, dude,
it was pretty good.
It was really fun.
If it would have had Siphon, it would have been pretty fucking awesome. Honestly. It was just like, it was very like into the action. You just drop in. You already have guns in your loadout. You just immediately drop in and you just start fighting. And it's just like the only thing that I wish is if we had the Siphon in the mats, you know what I mean. You could keep doing that. The best players would keep winning out and stuff like that, and just keep fighting over and over again. And it would have been even more fun. But as the mode stand, it was generally really fun. I like during queues, if I bricked or died off spawn or something, I just hop into John Wick for a little bit, just get a few really quick fights off. And then just go back to playing scrims and whatnot. So I think it's a good mode. I don't know. I wish they had introduced some kind of LTM like that in the future that could like maybe be another game mode that could be permanent or something.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If you're the type who's like, I'm going to hop into Team Rumble just to click on foreheads and warm up and stuff, John Wick was just better. It was just a better way to do
Especially because you just got your guns right off spawn. You didn't have to scavenge or any of that, which was honestly the best part about it for me.
Yeah, definitely.
I find it funny that we did all those Team Rumble updates, and they didn't just add weapons. Like, that's the whole point of the mode, is to rumble, right? But anyways, come on now. Where are we going? Why are we talking about John Wick and Team Rumble here? This is competitive.
What is this? Why did we get dragged here?
It's relevant, Balla.
All right, let's go to our next question from let's get Meat Fatality in here. How are you doing?
Good. How you doing, bro?
Doing great. What did you want to talk about tonight?
I wanted to talk about let me see. Like when you're playing the semifinals and the finals in the World Cup, like, should you play it differently? Like, should you like focus more on limbs? Maybe like up in the semis and like maybe more like on placement in the finals, or should you just treat it the same?
I think that's a pretty interesting question. That maybe Balla, you'll have kind of a unique insight into casting a lot of these games, both the semifinals and the finals, and watching the same players often between both, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Hey, Fates.
Yeah, thanks for the question, man. I think we'll discuss, and we'll move you out just because there's a little bit of background noise coming from your mic. So, but thanks, man. I think you shouldn't play them differently if you are a normal player and you're trying to qualify and you're trying to do your best and you're not like the the best of the best, right? You should just play the same. You should get qualified and practice, get as good as you can in those semis because they're still very good practice. So play it the same. If you're a god and you're going to qualify anyways, get as much practice as you can at whatever you need to practice, whether that's playing end game like a psycho, whether that's playing early game like a psycho, whether that's playing mid game like a psycho, or whatever it may be, practicing new drops for tomorrow or whatever. That's when you should be changing. If you're not confident in qualifying for Sunday, then don't change anything.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if people really don't understand that, like, even if you go for a kill heavy option in the semifinals, if you're one of those players who are looking to qualify and looking to rack up really high point games to get yourself that extra 1 or 2 game boost, you're going to need a lot of kills. And like, regardless of semifinals, regardless of finals, a lot of the people who are qualifying are people who know how to get lots of kills in a game. You'll see people with, 1 or 2 double-digit kill games, like absolutely just tearing stuff up. And you have to realize that you're going to have to get both placement and kills no matter what. If you want to play for placement, that's fine, but you need to get the kills on the way. If you want to play for kills, that's fine, but you need to have a little bit of placement points on the side too. So no matter what style you want to play, you're going to need to have an all-around balance to get really to the very, very top, because all of those players have high placement and high kills.
Yeah. Balla, you were VOD reviewing, it might have been Clicks earlier today. It might have been the guy prior to Clicks. Yankos, yeah. And they it was late in the game. They had taken height. They only had 2 kills up until that point. And you were kind of like waffling on like whether or not this is a good game, right? He ended up with the win or second place. But he's just low on kills. But by the time he got to second place, he still ended with like maybe a 6-kill game, which I think speaks to the power of like, there still is a lot of reason to just play for late game and play for height, because even on maybe it's a bad game, you're still getting like 4 or 5 kills out of just having high ground, right? Like guaranteed, not having to like fight people off, just shoot at people, the fish in the barrels, right?
I'm a huge proponent of specifically playing for kill incentive and making sure that you have your loadout set so that you can have a good end game, so you can make sure that you get towards those high placements and you don't waste your game. So like you should evaluate, right? And that's exactly what Yadkos did in my VOD review. Was he checked his position. What was it? Is it going to be a bad game? Do I have the mobility? Do I have the weaponry to be able to, play well in the end game? And if I did, then I'm chilling. I'm literally not shooting a single person, right? And then on the flip side, if he didn't have what he needed, he went and fought 1 or 2 people in the still like early game type area. If there was mobility nearby, he was fine. And then he would play edge zone until he got all the way through. And then he would chill if he had what he needed. But we didn't see any games where he didn't play until the end, and so I'm kind of sad that I didn't watch one of the demos where he died early, because I'm gonna bet that he left his drop spot without what he needed, and he went and tried to fight somebody and he died. And that's a good game, right? I'd rather have that than go to top 26 and die because I didn't have mobility, right? I would much rather have that. So you have to be cognizant of that, and you have to play for kill incentive. Infamous said it best, right? You got to maximize everything that you can get. If you have mobility and you have shitty weapons, you have a white AR and no shotgun, right? Like, all right, bro, like, sure, you have Rift to go. Sure, you'll get placement points, but you're not going to be able to maximize your points unless you find some lucky loot, right?
Yeah. In the context of semifinals and finals, I think that definitely holds up, right? Like a game where you go and you die, even though trying to do the right thing is still a good game, only to a point, right? Like if you've already played, if you still have hours left and you've wasted a bunch of games that way, right? And that definitely doesn't hold up, going into the World Cup where you don't have a time limit on your games. You know what I mean? You're playing a custom match with 100 people, every game has to be exceptional. Every game has to get you placement points and kill points, and that it's kind of harkens back to practice. We don't have a good way to practice that, you know, like we just don't, not even close.
Yeah, but at the same time too, like in a format where there's 6 games only or 8 games only or whatever it might be at World Cup Finals, I hope they do a lot of games. Is like if you have a bad, like there's only a set amount of games, but if you have a bad game, that's that much worse, right? It's kind of that much worse, and it's not that much worse, right? There's in these customs with 100 people, there's really not that much fluctuation in terms of scoring. So like it's usually, you know, if you have 1 or 2 bad games, it's fine. So why not try to get you set up for a good game so that you can pop off? Because the pop-offs are what wins all the tournaments so far. That's what it's been.
Well, a couple pop-offs, 3, 4 pop-offs.
Right.
Yep.
And I see a lot of people who want to like try to overthink stuff and want to, you know, oh, I should use this rotation item for only this zone, and like I should do this for this. Like, no, if you have a rotation item, just use it. Just keep using your rotation items until you're out of rotation items. Fight, get more rotation items. That's it. That's all you have to do. You don't need to overthink it. You don't need to, you know, think I should use this one for this and this, you know, here and this one, you know, I have to do this. You don't need to think about it like that. You just need to, if you have a rotation item, use them up. Once you don't have rotation items, go fight some people, get those kills, get your points up so you can get even more rotation items, because once you use those rotation items that you've already had, you secured the placement that you know you're supposed to get, right? And then after that, you're just fighting as you normally would to get even more placement. And that will enable you to be even more consistent because you are using your loot to, you know, the fullest extent. You can't be dying with a launch pad. You can't be dying with shadow bombs on your body. That's just not acceptable at that level. You can't. Yeah,
I think that makes a lot of sense. Like you reiterated there at the end there, but at the basis of that advice is you can't die while you're holding resources, right? Like dying while you still have mats is still bad, right? Like you shouldn't, you know, you just shouldn't. And then especially with any type of utility, but especially mobility, which can literally just save your life in these situations, dying with that on your person is awful and bad play. But I don't think that precludes smart usage of those items, right? Like it's better to use it immediately when it's relevant than not use it at all. But it's even better to use it in the smartest moments, in the smartest ways.
If you have the luxury to do that, 100% do it. Yeah. But that doesn't always happen. You see some people who are in late game who just have like one launch pad sitting in their inventory, like you know, and like they took, you know, unnecessary tags or something like that, or you know, they went for an unnecessary play to get a greedy kill or something like that. Like just rotate, get your kills when you need to get kills. Don't overthink it. Just play the game and use what you have at your full disposal.
Yeah, definitely.
Infamous knows all about unnecessary pushes. How many?
Let's hear. I want to hear about this.
I can't imagine how many DMs he gets about people freaking doing dumb stuff. Oh my god. I can't.
It happens a lot. I mean, guys, I don't know. Like a lot of people aren't part of the pro community, so they not necessarily know. But I mean, every single day we run games. I mean, you like during the game, after the game, it's just constant drama. I mean, constant people adding each other. I mean, most of it's all in good fun, just people, you know, mad in the moment. And no one actually takes it serious or holds any grudges. But it's, you know, people get frustrated. People are like, dude, what are you doing? I mean, I was playing earlier, like maybe an hour ago, some guy added me and told me, like, what are you doing? Like, what was that push? I mean, like at the end of the day, like everybody gets added, like every single player, like everybody gets added, every single player will add you back. I mean, it's just part of the game. Like people like want to think that like, you know, it's just a kid's game, so people aren't like taking it seriously. But I mean, people invest time into this. People, you know, want to have their practice. And when you feel like someone makes a bad push, like they're going to at you. They're going to at you and they're going to call you out and they're like, dude, what are you doing?
That's something people talk about all the time. Like, oh, it was such a, like, what do I do when someone's an idiot and just pushes me? You be good at the game and kill them? Like, what what do you expect someone to say? Like, it's gonna happen.
Right.
I shot somebody in the second zone rule Atlantis, and I just like full build fought them. I was like, oh shit, this is custom. I got like added so hard.
Delete the VOD, save his spot in Atlantis.
Well, hopefully I don't get banned, Infamous. Hopefully you don't ban me. If you do, whatever, man, whatever. So my other thought, though, is on the same topic. Like, I had this discussion actually yesterday in one of my VOD reviews. Somebody was, in just playing. Somebody was talking about getting kicked from Atlantis because people are doing dumb pushes or something like that. And I'm of the opinion that the fact that we can actually kick people for dumb stuff is detrimental to most people's practice. Why? Because if you think that you can get somebody kicked and somebody does something dumb, you're gonna be like, oh, that guy did something dumb, and you're not gonna blame yourself ever. Right. And people are gonna do dumb stuff all the time. Sure, I see the fact that we need to have rules like that because otherwise the practice sucks and we get light end games and whatever. But I feel like just having even just play common sense, just play like you would if you were at LAN. Like even those rules are detrimental to
there's thousands of players, none of them have played at LAN. Like the number of people who played Fortnite at LAN is a tiny
they
fraction.
said it in Prac cord, like they said that in Prac cord is where I'm mentioning that.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. So what do you guys think about that? Like, just argue for it, and also do you agree with that thought? Like, are people playing more dumb and like not improving themselves because of the fact that they can report people for dumb stuff?
I mean, I don't think. Well, in Atlantis, you can't really like there's no rule that says like, okay, if this guy does a bad play, he's gonna get banned. Like back when the original EU Atlantis cord was Razru's cord, that was like a rule where if someone did something like stupid, you could just report them to the moderators and they'd get them banned. In Atlantis NA, there isn't really necessarily a rule that says like, oh, you can just if someone makes a straight up bad play, you're not going to get reported for that. It's a learning environment. Everybody knows this is an open Discord that, not necessarily the most experienced competitive players. So like, you can't really think about it in those terms. Like, oh yeah, this guy's a dumb person. He makes a dumb play. Yada, yada. Everyone's, learning. Everyone's trying to figure out, a lot of inexperienced players are trying to figure out what they want to do in certain situations, and sometimes it's the wrong decision. I mean, there's nothing you can do to avoid that. So I mean, you have to be lenient with people, but at the same time, when you're talking about those higher up experienced Discords, when you're talking about Prac cord, when you're talking about the elite customs cords, I mean, if you're at that point, if you don't know what a good and bad play is, like, people are going to tell you what a good and bad play is. So, at that point, it's like, it makes sense. But in Atlantis, obviously, you want to have like a little bit of, buffer zone. You don't want to, you don't want to have people, getting banned for what some other people might perceive as a bad play when, somebody might, argue against it. You get into this gray area. When you have that many people, you want to keep everything as black and white as possible. You want to make everything as easy to understand as possible, what's right from wrong and what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and just give people like actual leg room to try strats, learn stuff, and just get the general competitive experience.
It's almost as if you practice that and you said that many times.
I mean, nice. A lot of people ask me a lot of things that may or may not repeat, but it happens. I mean, a lot of people have a lot of questions, and you have to get through everything. I mean, a lot of DMs, a lot of people just trying to figure out how they can get up, more into the competitive scene and stuff. So, I mean, as you go on, you just, you repeat stuff every now and then, but it's always in good information, and we got to get people ready to actually enter the competitive scene, because I mean, we don't even know, a couple months from now there could be a new young god who comes on the scene. He doesn't know anything about the actual scene, just comes in and obliterates people, just moves up the ladder. Like, that could happen at any time with any person. So we got to make sure that we have like a good path to showcase the best talent and show, okay, this person knows what he's doing, he doesn't belong here, let's move him up.
Yeah, that seems totally fair. You guys want to talk about contracts?
Sure.
I'm down.
I got flamed for contract. I got very flamed on Twitter about the contracts situations. So, because I was saying something about along the lines of how I would like, okay, so people misinterpreted it, right? So I basically went and I was memeing. I was basically saying that 15% in a contract is robbery. I personally don't like the idea of signing for 15%. I said along the lines of like, you'd have to pay me 8K or 6K minimum for me to sign for 15%. Yeah. And I'll clarify that by saying that I think there's different like strokes for different folks. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to have different contracts that fit different players. I personally am very confident in my ability, and I really want to perform. And I think if I had some big salary with a big percentage, it wouldn't incentivize me as much to go after that big prize. Like I want to have as little taken from me as for my competitive earnings as possible, so that I know that I'm playing, 100%. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to, earn my own money, and I'm going to, keep pretty much all of it. The idea behind that being, though, that I want to, I'm very confident in my ability to perform. So if I go and if I have a 15% in my contract, right, and I go to the World Cup, that's a lot of money being taken out. You know what I mean? If you're confident in qualifying for the World Cup, you should not sign for anything over 10%. Now, I wouldn't even sign for 10%.
Yeah.
Like, personally, I just think that, like, people really, I don't want to say that they undervalue themselves, but they don't understand what they're really signing.
Sure. Yeah. I think also it's important to recognize, like, it's that give and take and balance with everything, right? If they think they're going to win money, you shouldn't be signing away your money. If you think that you are going to pop off on Twitch, you shouldn't be signing away your Twitch revenue. If you think you're going to be, it's all these aspects, right? Being a pro player these days, like maybe, I don't know, I want to say like 25% of the time that also coincides hand in hand with internet famedom and sponsorships and money through that way as well, right? And it's a tough situation to be in, right? Especially when an esport is new, right? Like League of Legends, of course, has had these problems. Counter-Strike, of course, has had these problems. And I'd like to think that both those sports in both those games in a lot of ways have grown out of them. And a lot of that, I think, growing out of it in general,
League,
whether you
Counter-Strike.
No, well, whether you have or haven't, but as long if you want to, a lot of that has to do with just the education, like the contract literacy of the people being signed, right? Like,
and I mean, I'm never going to hate on anybody who's going to secure their bag. You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
I have a saying that, like, I don't know if you guys watch the NBA at all, but Charles Barkley always says, and, Shaq always says, keep getting them checks. You know what I'm saying? If you're a guy in the NBA or something like that and you're making your money, you know what I'm saying? Don't sacrifice your money for the good of the team. You're going to be playing for a certain amount of years, and that's it. I mean, that's the same with any sport. You're going to be playing for a certain amount of time, and that's it. Grab the bag. I mean, do what you got to do to, support yourself and accomplish your goals. I mean, no one's going to judge you for that. But at the end of the day, if there are different contracts for different people. Some people might be okay with having a high percentage in their contract as long as they get a decent salary. I'm just personally not one of those people. I would much rather have a 3K 10% contract over like a 6K 15% contract.
Sure.
Yeah. It's all about valuing yourself. You said it right. You just got to value yourself, and you have to actually evaluate yourself. I don't think there's anybody that besides honestly probably like Infamous or probably like somebody like myself who has literally gone in and probably looked at their growth numbers and been like, okay, where am I going to be in the next little while, right? And is that gonna be enough to be like, yeah, okay, this is worth it, right? It's literally a math problem for most people, and sure, it's estimating, it's modeling, it's all that stuff, and yeah, you can get really complicated if you want. Most people won't, just like I said, but yeah, it's just a math problem. You just look at your growth, evaluate yourself. But yeah, what you said too, Tim, the fact that it's early was very important, right? And TFue signed this relatively early. We didn't know that World Cup was going to be like this. We didn't
when he signed a 3-year contract, he had no clue what competitive Fortnite was going to be.
Yeah, he didn't get the $100 million announcement.
Yeah, we didn't get that yet. Okay, so yeah, like obvious, like. If I'm somebody back then, yeah, sure, I don't sign long contracts, in my opinion. Just
don't. Never.
Unless something is established and you're 100% know what's going to be in the future, don't.
Unless you're getting 401k and PTO, don't sign anything longer than what?
And that's the thing. People don't have lawyers read their contracts. You like, I don't care what you think is. You need an agent or a lawyer, someone who is trained in the law in this field specifically to look over your contract, because there are clauses like automatic renewal. There are clauses like survival that you need to look over, and you need to make sure you know what you're agreeing to, because
100%.
some of these clauses don't expire when your contract expires. Some of these clauses say, oh, if you don't notify us by a certain time, your contract's going to automatically renew. And that's what happened with TFue. I mean, he was signed for 6 months, automatically renewed into a 36-month deal. So
There's
I mean,
grace periods. There's
Right.
you know, free agency periods. There's
you need to
periods after your free
negotiate.
agency.
Right. You need
Like,
to do renegotiation periods in your contract. You need to have flexibility. You need to understand exactly what your options are. And I think a lot of people don't understand that their options that their
is
options
adorable.
their options are a lot broader than they realize, is what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, for those who are listening in podcast form, Infamous's dog just wanted some pets real quick. So
Just some
that's what
quick
happened.
head
Doggo.
switches. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to realize your options. You have to look at your contracts with a lawyer. If you don't, then you are going to screw yourself. You will screw yourself. Every single time you will screw yourself unless you are lucky enough to be offered a 2-month contract.
Of course, then in comes like
And
that.
even then, you could be screwed because you might sign an intellectual property or agreement that, you know, forfeits literally all of your content to them, and that's in perpetuity. And that
Which
means
isn't
that it's
unheard of.
forever.
Like this has happened, right? In
And
multiple scenes.
yes.
Like this is a thing.
Yep. It's a very, very huge thing. And so Fortnite is the scene with the youngest pros. 100% the youngest pro. I mean, yeah, actually 100% the youngest pros. There's no other scene out there that has, you know, besides like the spelling bee, right? So everybody is uneducated on this. So you're not going to get a 14-year-old kid who sees a contract and he sends it to his parents and he's like, oh, can we get a lawyer to look at this? No, they're going to send it to their parents and be like, hey, I'm getting $10,000. Let's freaking do this. And then they sign it away and all of a sudden issues, right? So I do believe we need something in esports in general. I'm hoping, and I think it will happen eventually, that like Sir Scoots with his CSGO union with its players will extend his services and everything to all sorts of different industries.
Yeah.
League of Legends is really lucky the fact that they have Riot to look over or to handle, not handle, but to deal with. Actually, Riot does do all of the like player salaries and contracts and all that, right?
Riot guarantees a minimum player salary that they will pay out. And they also have requirements for salaries of players in order for them to play in the league at all. But that's still handled by their organizations.
But yeah, so franchising is great in that sense, right? So I guess Overwatch and the CWL for COD has the same thing, but Fortnite is never going to have franchising because it's
100 people.
Come on, how is franchising ever going to work in Fortnite?
Yeah.
At least in the BR mode. Yeah, exactly, Rush, exactly. So we need more education. People like Infamous and this whole TFue situation is great. It's fucking great.
It's tough.
love it.
It's tough, right? Because you have sort of the like, I guess, slightly ethical discussion of like, yeah, he signed this contract, but also to him at the very least, it's
How
unfair.
old was he when he signed?
Was it 2
20.
years ago now, or just 1 year ago?
It was 2018, yeah.
Okay, so 20 years old. I mean, you know, you can argue whether or not he knows 100% what he's doing is best for him, but at the very least, he's old enough to understand, like, hey, I do have the right to, you know, have a lawyer look over this, and you know, you're at that age where you realize, okay, you know, I need somebody to make sure I'm not getting screwed over here, and that's the thing, like, you know, TFue is, you know, he's not some new kid on the block. I mean, the guy has signed contracts with Rogue before. He played in H1 professionally. I mean, he knows what he's doing. He's not just some random dude. The thing that really concerns me, just the entire situation. I mean, like, it's not even about TFue. It's more about like what was said about High Sky in the whole thing, which was the whole allegations that he is basically ineligible to compete or stream or, you know, do any of these things because he's 11 years old, right? Or work in general because he's 11 years old. And, you know, you can't do any of these things with any kind of contract if you're that young. You know what I'm saying? So like that, in my opinion, is like the biggest thing for FaZe is not even this lawsuit. The lawsuit is absolutely irrelevant compared to the Labor Commission's investigation if they decide to go in. If they feel they have enough sufficient evidence to go into where the whole underage drinking on company property thing, did the owners know about any of it? You know, any of that, that's serious legal repercussions that go far beyond any thing that the lawsuit could potentially do.
Yeah.
Yep. And repercussions in terms of like, you know, the talent like restructuring for whatever the California law or whatever it is, all that stuff is way more important. The rest of it is TFue just trying to
Get out of his contract.
He's just trying to get his
paper,
cash.
you know?
Yeah.
He's just trying to trying to catch
I mean,
those
the man
checks.
has a bad contract. I mean, what can you do at that point? Like,
This is the only way out for him. This is the only way
That's
out for him.
a long
right?
time.
Let's be clear, this stuff happens all the time. Like, listen, contract, like suing over a contract, a bad contract that might not even necessarily have anything that's illegal or anything like that is totally happens all the time for any sort of talent.
Yeah, you look for a reason for the court to agree with you to get you out of that contract. I mean, that's standard practice. There's nothing wrong with it.
Or any business, right? It's not even necessarily even
Right,
talent,
and that's
right? Any
the thing.
business.
People want to go and say like, oh yeah, he agreed to it. Well, it's not like people agree to stuff all the time. You agreed to Apple terms and conditions. That doesn't mean that, you know, you think every single one of them is legally binding, or you think that every single one of them would hold up in court, you know, et cetera, all this different stuff. So I mean, there's ways to get out of a contract and to legitimately, you know, contest a contract after signing. And that's what people don't get here. I mean, no matter what, even if you sign something, it would always be subjected to the law. It's not like you signed it in front of a judge and he made sure everything was good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, that agreement is between you and the company. And until you want to dispute that in the public eye, or, you know, in some form of due process, then you're going to have those questions like, is this okay? Is this legal even? Like, you know, but it's in the contract. And if he thinks that there's something he can use in there to have a judge agree with him that the contract is not okay by California law, then he'll get out of it. And it's just a smart thing to do when you're locked in for that long in a terrible deal.
Yeah, especially considering, you know, Balla, you mentioned trying to gauge your potential growth, right? Going into a contract and trying to evaluate yourself in a future sense. In this arena, right, in this world of online, not just like esports, but online entertainment generally, like that's a hard thing to do, right? Like Ninja might be able to sit down and really plan out his growth, but not TFue in the beginning of 2018, right? Like not in a million years, you know?
I
like,
forget that, you know, that most people don't have business degrees. So I don't even have, like, that's something that I've had to look up and be like, I know how to do this.
But even if he did have a business degree, I mean, he jumped from like wherever he was to bigger than Ninja. Like you don't, there's no way to beforehand expect that, right? Like,
I mean, there are certain things you can do. I mean, it's a business.
You can expect to be big, but maybe not that big. Like, I mean, he's the biggest streamer in the world at this point.
Right,
Yeah.
but you could have looked at his growth path. He could have looked at his growth path and been like, "Oh shit, I'm actually at this rate. I will be making $1 million every 6 months or whatever." He could have easily done that
Towards the beginning, yeah.
Like, he might not have expected, "Oh, I'm going to be making $10 million every freaking year." Like, oh, okay. Like, there's certain things, but there are paths. There are, you know, you can see compound growth. You can see exponential growth. You can see all this stuff that is very, 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 you know, well thought out in the world of business. And it is a business after all. It's all numbers. It's all money.
You have to make money.
Yep.
the thing is, part of joining an org is you're handing off a lot of that responsibility to someone else, which can be an amazing breather, whether in entertainment or a player. But you still need someone.
Never, though.
If you still need
Almost never.
someone to do that for you initially going into that organization agreement. That's
what an
a
agent
very smart
is
thing to do.
Technically supposed to be doing, right? It's
Yep.
supposed to be doing that, but almost never will. Number one, will you be able to? Well, I shouldn't say. Almost never will you keep any sort of agency going into an org. An org will try to forfeit your agency, and that might not happen for people who actually care. And they'll maybe be able to keep their agents, and they'll be able to, you know, keep watching that and keep evaluating the contracts. And it's not something that most players care about, keeping their agents, right? They would be fine with FaZe representing them. But if they do, there's almost no like business advice or anything like that in terms of, like, besides like your personal relationships with people. There's none of that.
I mean,
none of that.
There's a reason why an actor doesn't just rely on the producer for the film he's working on to be handling this kind of stuff. They keep their agent independent of whoever they're working with in that moment, because once you're signed to an organization, like, They might be obliged to, especially if, TFue's whole suit around being a talent agency or not, then they become obliged to share this kind of information. But as it stands right now, there's no reason for like E11 to go to Boyer and say, hey, you're growing really fast beyond what we're doing for you. Like that's not going to happen.
Yep, and that's also part of the crux of the issue. We talked about the actual like legal implications for FaZe, but for TFue, that's part of the crux of it, right? He can't bring his own sponsors or visit, like he can't bring any of the brand stuff that he could easily get without severe penalties for himself.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like you have organizations though, like what you were touching on just a second ago, Tim, where you were saying that E11's not going to go to Boyer and say, hey, you're outgrowing your contract or something like that. Well, I mean, like there are top organizations that will do that. You have
the
Team
good
Liquid
ones
who,
will, yeah.
Poach, explicitly said on his stream.
FaZe did that.
FaZe did that, but the person did not accept. But regardless, I mean, just in general, if during like the $500,000 tournaments, like Team Liquid was making a lot of money, Steve comes to them and is like, hey, we're taking a little bit too much from you. We need to restructure these contracts. If you guys are, cool with that. And, they already said that they were, eventually going to go to Steve anyway. But the fact, he comes to them and is like, hey, he recognizes the issue beforehand. And even if he didn't recognize the issue beforehand and they had asked him, they would have most likely been, 100% good to accommodate anything. They've pretty much accommodated every single thing that they've asked for, is what Poach has said. So, I mean, you have organizations like that who 100%, no matter what their business obligations, will put the players first because they know that the players being happy and the players being ready to, keep going with the organization is a lot better for the brand than to just drop players, keep picking up players, or try to figure out different situations that work. It's just keeping the players happy in their current situations is the best way to build your brand, is the best way to keep your name going in the areas that you want it to and keep it growing. And it's so much easier to do that when you have players that are happy.
Let's be clear, though. The Liquid players haven't outgrown Liquid, right? TFue has clearly and unequivocally outgrown FaZe. Like that's why Courage hasn't signed to an org. That's why Ninja, like people like this, are not, and they've completely outgrown organizations and they can't support them at all. So like Liquid, sure, they might go to a certain point and be like, yeah, I'll support you and we should restructure this. But once they outgrow them, what can he really offer, right? It's just at that point, it's just I have to leave. So FaZe did try to restructure the contract, whether that was their what was the word? I don't even know what the word is. Whether they did it first or whether TFue said, hey, can we restructure this first, is irrelevant to me, right? As long as they were receptive to it, and you should have been, because that's how you keep them. But unfortunately, they have him in a 3-year contract, so they can kind of be like, yeah, I mean, apparently the deals have been favorable, but again, you can't offer TFue 100K. Like, what is that?
TFue $1 million, and he didn't say yes.
Yeah, like that's exactly like.
Why would he? Why would he? Well, we've got Ninja on record saying ridiculous numbers, and we know that TFue's bigger. Like, there's it's got to be a big number, and even then you're like forfeiting so much potential growth and that kind of stuff, right? So as the last topic here, guys, before we start rolling out, sorry, Balla, you got something?
I was just gonna say and that's one of the reasons, right? He has to hold on for all these brand deals, because if he signs any brand deals right now, then there's so much left on the table. There's so much questions. There's so much uncertainty about whether or not that's useful. So if say he for some reason had a brand deal with Nike, whatever, for 25 mil over the next 2 years or something like that, right? If he can get out first and then go for it, like that's a huge crux of the issue that people are, like that is the biggest.
That's the motivation
fail for that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We don't have a ton of time left, so keep it short talking about this. But I did want to mention, Little has asked, do you think it's possible for Fortnite to create a league like LCS with Overwatch League, which is basically franchising? And we talked about how that's basically impossible, right? At some point, you're franchising individual players if they're not on an org, and like you don't buy a slot for an individual player. Like that's just weird.
Yeah, you can't do franchising, but you could definitely do a league. I think you could do something with relegation. 100%, you could do something to where the open tournaments online would feed into a specific LAN event, or maybe you have like you have it where, you know, certain organizations are involved in the mix and they pick up players for them to compete in, like, you know, a top and a bottom league where, you know, relegation is frequent, and, you know, that could happen 100%. I could see that. But the issue is whether Epic would even want it to go that direction, because at the moment they have a problem where, in my opinion, people don't necessarily get invested into the individual players as much. They don't, you know, the storylines in general aren't there like it with other esports. I mean, you have rivalries in other esports. You have teams that are, you know, always like contesting each other, and like there's heated fights between those teams in terms of like, you know, the games are that much more, you know, pressure and that much more exciting. I think if you have like a league where there's like the same 100 players, you're going to see teams that are going to be, you know, fighting for the same drops, and you're going to develop those rivalries. You know what I'm saying? So if you, in that environment, I definitely think it could happen, but it has to be done in a correct way. It can't just be a copy and paste from Overwatch. It can't be a copy and paste from League. It just won't work the same way. There's just too many players.
Yeah, and then
I'm super mad that you asked this question last, Tim, because this question has me burning. I could go for freaking years on this topic. Right,
okay,
bro?
hold on. I'm gonna let Balla go on this topic. I'm gonna go pee.
What a host, man. He just walks away right when I'm about to have my big rant. What the heck, dude? All right. So yes, you're right. I agree with pretty much everything you said, except for the fact that you can't develop stories and whatever, because I think you can. I think the fact that 100 players have to play in every, you know, everything is an issue, but it's so overcomable, right? We're paying out 1,500 players every single time. Yeah. No, how many people are we paying out? Like over 5,000 people are getting paid every single weekend. Like paid good money. This isn't like just.
Well, I haven't been paid yet, but yeah, we're promised to be paid.
Of course, yes, promised to be paid, sure. And Epic has, you know, been very good at paying people out. Maybe not necessarily fast, but regardless. I don't necessarily think that it matters if we don't hear about, you know, the bottom 25 or 50 or even 75 players in some match, because they're still going to get paid. They're still going to play well, right? As long as they are supported and they're happy with it. And then it's cool. And then they have the opportunity to become the story, right? There's always the opportunity for somebody else to become the story. And that's awesome. And I think there are so many like awesome little structures that we could do to make a league format work great. Obviously, you cannot be League of Legends. You cannot be OWL, right? You can't be OWL. You cannot franchise. That is just out of the question. And like, no, it's just out of the question in all sorts of different reasons, right? But you can do regional events, right? Where you start open qualifiers, you find 100 players, they qualify to the next tier, whatever. Sure, some of those might not get viewership because nobody cares, but as long as they get paid, then it's cool, right? And then once you move up the tiers, you do an NA East thing, and now shit's getting interesting, right? Now we have 100 players that are in contenders for NA East, and then we have another 100 players that are in the big thing, right? Yeah. Oh shit, they're in NA, they're in, this is it, playoffs are starting, like. And they're going to be sent to the world finals, right? The top 20 from this region is going to get sent to the world finals. Now shit gets real interesting. Like there's more interest levels over and over, and there's enough money that this could totally work. I don't think necessarily Epic wants to do it. I would fucking fiend for this shit. This is so cool because just like Infamous said, I would love a recurring set of the exact same players playing over 6 weeks and playing 10 games a week. I would love that. Or 20 games a week or something like that. And then you could do a pro league format too, right? Where 1 week means these things. If you get this in that week, then you do this, and then you win for that week, and now your standing is blah, whatever. And Pro League, for reference, is the StarCraft 2 Pro League that they ran in Korea, which was a team league in StarCraft, which had such an interesting format, right? They had, number one, the actual gameplay format, and then number two, they had the overall format where it was week to week, how you did. Like, it was really interesting. It's hard to kind of explain off the cuff of my head. The cuff of my head? What the hell is that? Off the top of my head.
There we go.
Off the cuff. There you go. So, but yeah, very interesting things can be done with Fortnite, and there's enough money to support low viewership in the low tiers. There's 100% enough money.
I'd be very surprised and very disappointed if after World Cup, something more involved like that isn't announced. Like you said, I
just think that like in general, like just people don't know enough pro players. Like there's just so many pro players that are so good out there that just don't get the viewership or the recognition that they deserve. And I definitely think that having a pro league in that sense would definitely show people like, hey, these people deserve to be here. These people are really good players. They deserve to be on the organizations that they're on, and they're performing against the highest tier players every single time they get in the server with them. It's just at this point, the opens help, right? But when you have so many different players and you have so many different possibilities of what they could do, what their decision making is, and where they, land from game to game to game, it becomes very, very difficult to understand, okay, how is this person, evolving throughout these games? How is their decision making changing? What are they doing differently? When you have a closed environment, you can more easily track changes and evolution of the player's thinking and just what they want to do, how they want to do it, and the results of that. You know what I mean? So it's so much easier to do that in a 100 player custom than it is to do it in the World Cup Open.
It's always going to be the best way to gauge a player's growth as in the competitive scene and within their own skill and mindset, like you've said. The best way is always going to be like watching their individual streams and point of view, but it's really sucky that that's the only way. And it hard gatekeeps other people, the majority of people who might be interested in these sorts of stories.
So last thoughts, because I know we have to wrap up. But if you guys are expecting this huge league thing, I'm sorry, but you just get ready to be disappointed. I'm wishing for that. I have no idea what the plans are in the future, but we're doing World Cup right now, and we can see how it's being received and all this sort of stuff, and how it's being ran and. So I just get ready to be disappointed because I have 0% hope that is going to be the case.
Oh no!
Unfortunately, I have no idea. Again, I have no idea.
It's highly unlikely.
But,
I mean, yeah.
All the storyline development and stuff like that, I don't think we need that to be able to do that stuff. Like the reason that nobody is watching Scrims, who qualified week number 1 in duos, or week number 2 in duos, the reason why nobody's doing that is because we, as a show, not necessarily, blaming specifically on the Fortnite show. I think there's issues with developing story there, but we as a community haven't done the stuff that we need to be able to tell that story, right? Nobody has tweeted. All the tweets are about the top people because they want to get the clout. There's nobody telling these low stories about how Crimson Spades, held paradise against all the best teams.
Right.
There's none of that. There's none of that at all. And then from a show perspective, yes, we could 100% do so many more cool things about telling stories. I just don't think that we're ready for that. I mean,
it's too many players. It's hard. You guys.
That is my goal as a caster, is to show you guys that it's possible that we can follow these stories and get excited about them. And I think we did a great job at ESO Katowice doing that. Or at least the start of that.
Right.
We almost got there, in my opinion. If we had better tools, we would have been able to get there. That's my job as a caster, is to do that, is to get you guys involved and get people emotionally invested in Scrims, right? Because he had, he threw up 3 times, he broke his keyboard in the middle of World Cup. How is that not a freaking sick story?
Yeah.
Right? Stompy and Shinkin at ESO Katowice crashed 7 times out of 12, and they still got 6th place. What? These guys are gods.
Yeah.
They're
Most people don't even know that. Most people don't even know that.
But the counter argument, right, is that if a rookie in the NBA is crushing it, but for whatever reason their games are never televised and nobody ever sees anything about them other than their stats, are they really gonna blow up in the public eye? No, they won't, because most people are lazy. Most people are lazy consumers, right? The majority of the things I do in my life, I'm a lazy consumer. That's not really a
counter argument, right? That's agreeing with it. That means the NBA did a bad job at scheduling their matches because they didn't expect this guy to pop up.
That's what I'm saying, is having a league, having more games played through more events I think helps more than an individual event being casted well can do, right? Like there's only
like,
so much.
There's nothing that you can There's nothing that you can do about that, Balla, in terms of like where it comes to like there's so many players and so many different storylines to keep up with, and so many different people, you know, with so many different drops and strategies and keeping track of who wants to do what, where. It's no one's gonna blame you guys if you can't do it in an open format like that. In a closed off format, it's definitely going to be a lot easier to keep track of individual players and individual storylines, and that's why I think, you know, that we're going to get those people exposed to, you know, the exposure that they deserve. But I just, in an open format, no one's going to, I would highly doubt that anyone's going to blame you guys for not keeping track of every single thing that's happening with one particular duo. You know what I mean?
Come on, Infamous. Have you read Reddit? Come on,
there's 1,500 duos, and obviously.
I got shit at ESO Katowice because apparently we didn't focus on Mitra and Kuna, who got 5th place, and I was fucking harping on them the entire time. I was like, oh, Mitra and Kuna. Like, people
will always be unsatisfied no matter what you do. But at the end of the day, all that matters is that you're doing, because you guys have the skills to do it. You guys have executed on it well before, and you guys can do it again. But no one's going to blame you for not keeping up with every single possible storyline. It's just not feasible. So
or at least
I mean,
no one
that's
should.
Right? Yeah, no one should. So no one with a brain. But but just in general, I think that like a closed system would work a lot better in terms of a lot of different aspects of branding and a lot of different aspects of the business side, and just getting people invested in the esports itself and trying to turn this into a legitimate, real, like recurring multi-year esport that has real longevity. You're going to need people to be invested in the top players. You're going to need people to be invested in the scene as a whole, invested in rivalries, invested in brands. And I feel like it's much, much easier to do that in a closed circuit system.
Yeah.
So that's just my take on it.
All right. Well, we are just about out of time here. We're past out of time. So let's wrap up here. So, but I wanted real quick.
That means we had a good episode, Tim.
Quickly, I've been enjoying asking this question of the guests, and I always enjoy asking it of Balla. But Infamous, in next week's patch, it's a smaller content patch, right? What do you most want to see in those patch notes?
So again, I think that something that they're doing that's been very good, like I said, is adding stuff like the TAC AR, which is just a weapon that fills an area that, you know, hasn't been filled before. Something that's innovative, that really has a real use in the
You mean
meta,
it fills an area that's been filled by a lot, just by a lot of different items.
A lot of different items that don't necessarily hit that point. You know what I'm saying? So it's like there's certain little places where a gun could fit in, where it does, you know, 2 or 3 things that are really good, but, you know, 1 or 2 things are just, you know, it's not for that. So I just want a lot more loadout diversity, but with that comes a lot of issues with balancing. You know, one thing might be overpowered, you know, one thing might be something
wrap it up.
The community might be pissed off, you know, a little bit, but the experimentation is good. I will say, I definitely like where they're going with the TAC AR. I definitely think that their experimentation has been in the right direction recently, and I think they can hit the nail on the head again if they just keep identifying those places where they can add guns that really diversify the loadouts that you can have in the game. So I really am just looking for new weapons.
Yeah, rad. Balla, what do you want to see on these patch notes?
Yeah, I want to see Poison Trap darts back with the rework, where it doesn't actually do damage to HP. I thought Poison Traps were fun and interesting, and make it so it doesn't trigger you when you get Poison Trapped.
You want it to do shield damage first?
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
I agree with that.
Okay, yeah, legitimate. All right, Infamous, thank you so much for being our guest this week. I had a great time. Yeah, of course. I hope you had a good time. Infamous, what are you going to be up to, and where can people watch you get up to it?
Well, I stream occasionally. I try to stream a lot more, but I'm very busy with different stuff. But I try to stream a lot at twitch.tv/infamousfn. You can find me on Twitter, @infamous_FN. And I'll be playing this weekend's qualifiers. Hopefully I'll, you know, make it through that top 6 on Sunday. We'll see. You know, never know. So I'm going to be trying my best, and hopefully you'll see me on the big screen.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not trying to draw a direct correlation here. This definitely isn't a direct correlation, but Elevate on the show last week, Elevate wins semifinals in NA East. Elevate wins finals in NA East. I'm definitely not saying there's a direct correlation there.
Nice.
Hopefully, I don't break the streak. There's a lot of pressure now.
I like it, Tim. Get out of the hosting curse. Like, make sure that the responsibility is not on your hands. I like it. I like it.
Balla, what are you up to? What are you going to be doing?
I have more VOD reviews tomorrow. We're going to be reviewing Riversun and who the freak are? Oh, Lecce, the controller player who won first in EU in week 5.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be playing in the qualifiers this weekend for solos. Hopefully I do well. I need to get my shape back into it. So I'm going to be grinding like crazy today and tomorrow. Well, maybe not today. But besides that, I'll also be casting EU and NA West. I'll probably do EU semis, play NA East, take the night off, and then do EU casting, play NA East, and fingers crossed I should be able to make the finals. I mean, I'm not a bot. Like, come on, man. And also I was on the show.
So. Don't forget about that.
So playing the finals in NA East and then casting NA West as well. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. You can find that at twitch.tv/BallaTW, and everything else is also at BallaTW on Twitter, Instagram, and
YouTube.
Peace, guys. It was a lot of fun. Thank you, guys.
Yep,
Thank you guys so much for coming in, and hope you guys have a great evening.
Bye.
Peace.
All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in again to another episode of Hotline FN. This is our 3rd episode, season 9, week 3 for Fortnite. Kind of coinciding with those weeks perfectly. Again, if you enjoyed the show, please feel free to support us wherever you find us. You can find the podcast. It's available through Audio Boom, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. This, of course, will be up on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe. That helps immensely. And, of course, you can always catch us live on twitch.tv/TIMMCD. It's where we are right now. And, of course, following and subscribing there is a huge boon and helps us continue to be able to do this Hotline FN. So again, thank you so much for listening, for watching, for conversing with us, and we'll catch you next time on Hotline FN.